evening and welcome to this, the October 7th edition of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Colin Dowe and I'll be serving as your host this evening. We're taking a look at food security and food import bill here in Grenada. There's been lots of conversations and just how vulnerable we are as a small island developing state to the importation and the cost of bringing our food items and what that means for us as a people. So this is the topic that we'll be tackling this evening. Thank you so very much for joining us, whether you're at homes, whether you're in the bars, whether you're driving home, looking on GBN television, GBN radio, or any of our social media platforms. It is indeed a pleasure to have you share part of your Monday evening with us. I have an esteemed panel of guests, so I will ask them to introduce themselves. Starting off at my immediate left, we do have Senator Roderick Sinclair, who is the senator responsible for agriculture in our upper house. Senator, welcome.
Thank you, Colin, and I want to say good evening to everyone who is following us both locally and overseas.
All right. I also have a Rose with me this evening, Lawrence and Louis. Welcome from the Ministry of Agriculture.
Good evening, Colin, and good evening to all our listeners, and we hope to have a very interesting conversation here tonight.
Excellent. And representing the Grenada in the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Mr. Denison Slocum. Denison, welcome.
Thanks to be here. Good evening, Colin, first of all, and good evening to all our listeners, all our viewers. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I hope this conversation will spark something that will lead to some sort of change and betterment within the Grenada.
Well, thank you so very much. I mean, and that really is the tone, because, you know, the program is both educational, but we can do some agitation for change, because we don't want to just have a talk shop. And, you know, hopefully we're able to bring some enlightenment to our audience, but at the same time instigate and agitate for some change. But as we attempt to just frame this conversation, we're speaking of food security, let's just probably have some definitions. And Senator, I'll go to you. When we speak of food security, what are we referring to really?
Well, food security, from my understanding, has about 4 different perspectives. And in summary, one of it has to do with the availability. Is there food? Is there green banana? Is there sweet potato? Is there plantain? Is there fish? Is there goat meat? Is it available? And then the other dimension has to do with access. Is it really accessible? Is it only in Sotez, so I'm in St. George's and I cannot get it? Is it in Carriacou and I cannot find it because I'm in Grenada? Access. But also has to do with, do I have enough money? Mm-hmm. Do I have enough income, cash flow, to be able to buy food? So that's another angle in summary. And then we also have to look at the issue of utilization. I may have a lot of bananas, a lot of mangoes, as is normally said, a lot of soursop. And what happens to it? Are we going to preserve it? Are we going to prepare them in certain special ways so that we could consume more of it, make it more nutritious? Are we going to store it in a way? Are we going to process it and maybe make it less nutritious and less healthy? Utilization. And then, of course, the last one has to do with stability. You know, is it regularly available? Is it seasonal? And if it's seasonal, then how do you do substitute? And how do we connect it back to maybe utilization, storage, and so on? I mean, there might be other dimensions, but these are the overarching parts. And so I think that understanding that will help us as a nation to understand why we do certain things. Because, for example, we speak about inputs, but input also is a strategy in your food security. Now, how you do it is another story. Now, local supply is also a strategy, but how do you do it? Because if you don't have certain nutrition that the country need and it's unavailable, what do? Do you say, well, to hell was that, let the people perish? So then your protein base is less and people suffer because of that. They may say, well, let's find a substitute. Is the substitute proper? So all of these are the considerations in this matter that households, businesses, and government have to make at some point in time.
So, Lauren, we heard availability, we heard accessibility, we heard utilization as certainly 3 of the things, and the recognition as well that part of the strategy would involve importation. What is that import bill? If you can give us a sense, how much money does Grenada spend bringing in food?
Well, the last number that I would have, it's over half a billion dollars in imports. Food that we, the price, the amount of money that we spend on food that is imported. I know a lot of people would say that is $500 million that could have been spent here. But as Senator Sinclair said, we have to think it's a much wider system. It's not just spending or getting all that money to stay inside here, because you may not be able to satisfy all of the needs that you have with your production here. But it does also speak to the fact that this is expenditure that we're giving out, and so we should try to lessen on that. Our dependence on food, on external food, is alarming, and we have to be able to find a way to produce what we eat and what we want to eat. We also have to. Senator Sinclair spoke about the pillars of food security. We also have to think about our culture and what people are accustomed to eating, and how we can manage or change or bring people back to eating what it is that you want them to eat or that you can produce.
So we were basically demonstrating that we can have shifts in culture, because what we eat is not necessarily what our parents eat.
Exactly. And the shift hasn't been, if you think about the amount of years in which this shift has happened, it's not a lot. So we can shift back.
But let me just ask this: what are we spending on? What are some of the big ticket items when we think of food imports? What are some of the big ticket items that we're importing?
Meat is one of the biggest things.
Meat.
We spend a lot on chicken. We spend a lot on goat and sheep, on mutton, on pork. We spend quite a bit on that. And then we do the other staples. So potatoes and onions, carrots, a lot of those. Right. Then of course the processed foods, because we have no manufacturing, no big set of manufacturing here. So the processed foods, the cereals, we spend a lot of money on wheat and grain, that sort of thing, for all the different things that we do for the production of flour, for beer, and those other things. So those are some of the major areas that we spend a lot on.
Okay, and whereas, because I was looking at a study, and whereas beverage importation regionally fell, wheat importation was still high. Yep. So basically what that signal from what you're saying is that we didn't stop drinking. No. It's just that we were manufacturing what we were drinking.
Exactly.
Well, I guess that might be a good. Right? That might be a good. Dennison, how are chamber members getting involved in the agricultural sector?
All right. Well, first of all, let me make a reference to just tie in the food security issue. It is said that if you're on an island that only produces coconut, and you harvest all the coconut, but what the people want to eat is pie. Now the question is, do we have food security, seeing that we have harvested all the coconut on the island? But the demand...
So you have to learn to make pie out of coconut?
It's not for coconut, it's for pie.
But you make pie out of coconut?
And then we try to make pie out of coconut. Right. So I believe a big part of it we have to focus on, I think it was said, is the demand side of that demand and supply chain. What are we demanding? What are we calling for? What are the cultural aspects involved that have us wanting the chicken and wanting the mutton? Because as a private sector, a private sector business wouldn't just bring in stuff hoping that it sells. You do a market research, you understand what the demand is. To answer your question, yes, we are heavily involved as a private sector. I think we have, as we were discussing earlier, we have a big part to play in responsible for food security on the island, what is imported. It goes beyond the bottom line, it goes beyond a surplus or profit. We have in recent years been working with different organizations, different small business, large companies, companies to really get involved in what it is that we bring in. But at the end of the day, it goes back to demand and supply. A lot of it is what is being demanded is what will come into the ports. So yeah, the chambers can do its part, but then there has to be a shift culturally for us to really see that change.
Do you see the chamber having any responsibility in assisting in that cultural shift? And this is a reality. And you probably can respond to the accusation that we don't have many businessmen in Grenada. We have some traders. You buy low, you sell high, you make a profit, you run home, you wipe it out clean. And Lauren pointed out to our limitations in manufacturing. So even if when we do have produce, the secondary products are scarce or imported because we're not manufacturing. What is the chamber's responsibility to ensuring, one, food security, and two, assisting in that cultural shift? Because more monies in Grenada would also mean more monies for you.
The chamber for me.
Both.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it has to come from a policy level, because a lot of what the chamber does is advocacy, right? We work together to achieve policy that will actually affect change within the private sector. We have been we have had quite a few encounters with different organizations that are willing to fund, are willing to collaborate on a lot of sustainable practices, climate friendly, resilient crops, resilient production practices. And I think from the chamber's point of view, we stand for anything that reflects growth and development in Grenada, right, in a sustainable manner. So yes, we have a part to play when it comes to policy. We have a part to play when it comes to advocacy, working with our members. We cannot go into our members' coffers and say this is what you should buy, this is what you shouldn't buy. But if we want to have that cultural shift, it starts at a policy level, and that is where we come in to ensure that the policy that is being passed will reflect what we want to see, how we want to see our Grenada, the future we would like to see. I think that is where we come in. And then we have the training, yes, we have the funding, the grants, and everything else, but it starts originally from a policy level.
But let's speak to the people who set policy. So I'll go over to Senator here because he's the one that set laws, right? So let's see if I'll get an eye for this, all who in favor. But the ideal, and I was joking when I said let's make pie out of coconuts earlier, but if we look at Guyana as an example, and it was probably heavy-handed when former President Burnham imposed a ban on a number of fruits, especially around Christmas time. And culturally, the Guyanese still have fruits because they still have Christmas cake, but the fruits that they utilize are those that are imported. So a Guyanese Christmas is markedly different from a Grenada Christmas by way of what they consume, one, and what they use to produce the very same things. Should we as Grenada do some introspection and try to, through strong policies, have and instigate or incentivize that cultural shift? And not, I'm trying to not use the word ban.
Well, no, I don't think we have to, have martial law about banning. You see, because if you ban something, you must make sure that you have some suitable alternative. I think it's a proper thing to do in a democracy which we live in at this stage. And so we have to create a new level of consciousness, and we have to target. So for example, we may decide, okay, if you say making cakes, for example, and all these confectionaries on Christmas, okay, you could use that as a target and say, what are the substitutes you can use? You can use maybe your orange peel and your 5 fingers, and so you set up industries in whatever way around that. That would create employment. It would create new sense of hope and industry among people. And then you make sure though that there is connect to the buying. So the private sector, for example, know that they would need 500 tons or 50 tons or 25 tons of this, but we know locally that we can only produce maybe 2 tons or 3 tons. You say, okay, over the next 5 years, we're going to look to do X, Y, and Z. We'd have have 25 different persons throughout the country who will be producing to certain specification, and get the Bureau of Standards involved, etc. And we work that program. It wouldn't happen overnight. It may take 3 years and you build. But if you don't really have a target, you don't have a plan, you would have a problem. The same thing we can go with carrots. You may say, there's carrot season, you put the planting arrangement, you put the storage arrangement. But if there is no plan, my brother, we'd have a problem. And so I always challenge the Ministry of Agriculture. Where is the plan? We want to increase production. Okay, fine. But maybe we take 5 items or 3 items. The question then ask ourselves, who are going to be producing it? Okay, we'll get some farmers, fine. Are the farmers capable? Do they have the land? Do they have the labor? Do they have the irrigation set up? Maybe those who are willing to do it may only able to produce for 4 months of the year because they don't have enough land space, they don't have enough rotation, so you need to get another 4 persons. So maybe in the meantime, you say for the next 3 months, we know that our first target is to deal with this group of persons, and you work with them. And the private sector, which has the market, is connected with that. But those things are not difficult to do, Colin, you know, but you have to have a system. So at the policy level, I would have tabled a motion sometime last year at the Senate and say, look, we need to have a national food security committee, sort of working group, a task force to address this matter. In fact, the Secretary General of the UN, United Nations, FAO, Mr. Guterres, actually said that in his World Food Day speech last year, that we didn't have the stakeholders totally involved in agriculture value chain and engaged. Instead, what the government came in with, they said, well, you know, we would strengthen the Food and Nutrition Council. The Food and Nutrition Council will help you with utilization. But where are the other aspects? So I think that was very narrow-minded and have done Grenada bad by not supporting a thought like that. And even if you didn't support it in the parliament, you have done nothing by way of saying, but you know, we should really look at that and set up a national food security system so that we can be able to protect ourselves. Because when there is no food, the security of the country is in jeopardy because everybody looking for food, and that is not good. I know I speak a lot on that point, but I think this is the angle, and I don't want to get deeper in speaking about the role of the MNIB, which is an important public good. We're going to get in that space.
We get to how the house, so because I'm going to ask you about that. So rest assured, we're going to get there. Lauren, but how do we augment the food import bill? Do we just plant more? How do we go about doing it? I know that Senator started with some ideas.
Right. So I think it has a lot to do with, as Senator Sinclair said, planning. You have to plan what it is you're doing. You have to have a target for what it is you're doing. You can't just say, as he said, whatever crop, carrots is a low-hanging fruit. Let's just make more. Let's just do more carrots. You have to have that plan in place. You have to have your farmers in place. You have to have the inputs to ensure that as you don't want to give them the seeds, because carrots is seeds. You don't want to give the farmers the seeds, and then when they're ready for whatever cultural practice, so you're ready for fertilizer, you're ready for that, you don't have it. Right. You have to have a program in place, and you have to have, along with the actual material things, you have to have the training in place. You have to have technical officers who can guide the farmers to make sure that their production is stable, and make sure that at the end of the day you're not disappointed, that the farmer is not saying, well, the ministry encouraged me to do something, and then no, look at it, I have, instead of when I planted a half acre of carrots, I got what you would have for a quarter of the half acre. So you have to have that plan in place. You also have to think about who's buying, how are you going to store it, because we have seasons. And you have, we're a small place with small land space. Right. I mean, big enough land space, but small land space when you think about larger countries. And if you think, how much are you going to be putting in? How much are you going to be requesting of the farmer to put in? And how much is he going to get out of it? You have to ensure that there's a systematic plan in place to ensure that every step is covered, so that at the end of the day, when you have when you reap your harvest, if the ministry or whatever body, as MNIB, something like that, if that body is going to be purchasing all of the farmer's produce, so that the farmer now does not have to go out and look. He's a farmer, he's not a marketer. He wants to be able to grow his food and get his money, and then go back and grow some more food. He does not want to have to go looking for markets, looking for, and then having a lot of produce on his hands that he cannot sell. Okay. So we have to think about it from the top and right down to the end of the entire chain of events that has to happen.
Go ahead. If I could just add to that, I'm a Cuban trained, so I spent 10 years in Cuba, and one thing that impressed me about the economy is what something they call the economía planificada, the plan economy, right? And despite all the flaws they may have in the results, but they have a very unique way of maximizing land use, maximizing their production. Because of the blockade that is on Cuba, a lot of the things that they may need, they have to produce it internally. And the way that they organize their production, they make best use of the best land that they have. So even though that this particular province is a more hilly, more mountainous region, they will focus on crops that will grow better in that area. They'll focus on livestock that will thrive in the coastal areas. I think we are small, but we can still learn something from that approach. There are certain crops that grow better in the tongue area, in the drier area.
This is my question. We have been an agricultural economy for eons. Why hasn't that planned approach taken root? We were one-trick pony under the colonizers because they told us this is what we plant. But before independence, but certainly since independence, why our approach has not been one of this is the best area for our nutmegs, this is the best area for cocoa. When cane came in, they did sampling obviously and decided where they wanted to plant cane and what type of rum would have been produced based on where the cane was coming from. A planned approach. That's a company. Why hasn't Grenada taken that on, Senator?
See, every time these questions come up, I put it straight down to an issue of leadership. Leadership is something that you people may have a definition, but my simple way is that you have a purpose, you know what you want to do, and you put a plan in place. And putting a plan in place, you need to have the right resources in terms of personnel and all those other things that goes with it. And so my brother has spoken about it properly. But let's look at it. You speak of a socialist country in the case of Guyana then. You speak of a socialist country in terms of Cuba then. And so the question of whether you're having a martial law to make those change, do you really need that for that? The jury's out. The jury's out.
No, but let's be clear, because sometimes we call countries socialist by way of the politics overarching principles that they practice. But at the same time, if we look at the protections for agriculture in the U.S., for agriculture in Canada, and we wouldn't call either of those countries socialist countries, but it is about food security. So I don't want anyone to get the impression that you have to tie your head in red and you're some type of communist bandit when you look at food security for your country.
So that comes back to the same point of, is a leadership issue, and what do you really want, and how do you plan to get things done, and that is really lacking, and you know, it's funny because as you speak there, I know persons watching in right now and they say, but we had a thriving banana industry in Grenada, in the Windward Islands. But when did it stop thrive? Notwithstanding the issue of the Black Sigatoka just around 2004, is at GIS start looking at the cost and the profitability again, driven by big business.
Well, the whole support. 1996 Bridgetown Accords, and then the WTO rulings certainly impacted us.
But what would have happened? The focus reduced, because remember, they used to provide the packaging, the extension officers, the inputs. They had the whole value chain. They provided the boat, so we don't have to worry when the boat come in and when the boat not coming. So they had a down pack. They train the farmers. They do everything. The question is, which of the other subsectors have we seen that in? And the interesting thing is that we're not speaking about export food security. We're speaking about local food security. So the question arises, where's our private sector? And what is the confidence our private sector is placing in our same economy, where persons like Gis and so on was able to cause these same farmers and producers to excel, build houses, send his children to university, and all of those things, goes on big holidays. But so all of a sudden they just get so bad that they cannot keep doing the right thing. There's a loss of confidence by our local private sector in our producers. And we need to rebuild that, and we need to find a way. And that's where I think government has a role to help to be part of, and I'm not saying to do, to be part of that whole setup. My brother speak about the whole issue of, he sort of hint to that in terms of the land use policy, which I know we could discuss that later on.
No, but that's actually where I want to go now, in terms of the maximizing. And Lauren, I was going to come to you on this one. Are farmers maximizing the lands that they possess in terms of what they plant, how they plant, and how has the ministry been attempting to support them and guiding them in that direction?
Okay, I think traditionally, maybe, I don't know if I want to say that they have not been maximizing, but I think that a lot of farmers can produce more. We do things, I think, a lot in agriculture in Grenada because that's how we know it done. You know,
that's how we've been doing it.
Right, there's no technical knowledge going into that. And even sometimes when you come with technical knowledge, our farmers are very resistant to changing the culture again, right. To changing because their grandfather did it this way and he did whatever, and their father, and then now they are going to continue to do that. So I think part of what we have to do as a ministry is to have some demonstration areas, to have demonstration plots, to have different areas where you can show. Because it's one thing to have a training session and you see. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to have a demonstration farm or a demonstration plot somewhere, or different areas in the country that farmers could come to and learn how to do something and see how much more that they can produce. In terms of the suitability for the soil suitability for the crops, just recently over the last 2 years, we've had as part of a project, I think it's the Moroccan project. No, the Moroccan project was fertilization, but we have, as part of our information in the ministry, a soil suitability map.
Right. So we will have that? We
have that.
Okay.
So we've been working on understanding our soils. We have also, now we have a soil care project that is currently going on. And through that project, they've actually taken samples all over, hundreds of samples all over the country and sent them to get tested. And then so a farmer can reach out to us and get the information as to what in your area, what your soil lacks, what it has, what is the best thing. So we put that sort of information together and use a soil suitability map. So you can say in this area, it would be the best place to plant soursop against something else. And then you can say, okay, so even though it's the best place to plant soursop, now you would need to augment your production with this fertilizer, with this frequency, and to go along it in that kind of way.
Has this been implemented systematically, or are we still in the germination stages of this rollout?
It hasn't been implemented how I want it to be implemented. I would like it to be a part of all of our plans, especially when you speak to like extension officers or agronomy.
It has to be part of a national strategy.
It has to be part of us. Has to be part of a strategy. Senator Sinclair was speaking about policy, and that is one of the areas I think that we have been weakest as a ministry, to have a policy that we follow. We have a lot of policy. We have a lot of things written. But to use those things in order to increase our production or to stabilize your production, we haven't been really doing that. And
what has been the challenge in implementing such?
I'm not sure. I think a lot of it has to do with the will.
Because I think you're right, because what I'm hearing, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that we know what the right thing is because we had the technocrats. The research was done whether locally or in collaboration with external organizations. So the data is there. The policies are there. So we have an implementation problem. Why is that? Why does that continue to be an issue?
I'm not sure what it would have been previously, but now in our time, we also have a problem of scarce human resources. That is one of the major issues with the Ministry of Agriculture, in that we lost a lot of officers over the last, say, 5-10 years, who would have been seasoned officers, and they have not been replaced.
Okay.
And so, in order to implement anything, any program, anything that you have, any project, you need to have the people to do it. And as it stands now, we're left with a lot less people trying to do a lot more things.
Right.
And then so you get stretched, and particular focus isn't paid to the things that need to be done.
Yeah.
But overarching, I think that we need to sit down and do a whole plan where you incorporate all of these things, and you like I said before, you set some targets as to what it is. If you want to say for the first 3 years you want to increase the production of whatever by whatever percent, you do that. And once you put those things in place, then you ensure that you find markets for the goods. You make sure in that way you build the confidence of the private sector, because then they can say, okay, so really and truly we can depend on every whatever period of time, we can depend on getting the items that we need, the quality and the quantity that we need, and every time you do it, and then you
so they don't know
start
where to invest and how to invest. Exactly. Likewise. All right. Go ahead and finish your thought.
No, I was just saying that there's also the need, yes, to build that confidence in the value chain. And when we're talking about the PPP, the public-private partnerships, a lot of it has to do with the flow of communication and information. Yes, we have a lot of information is in the public sector's hand, but the private sector they have to seek it out for themselves, and sometimes even the other way around, because one of the things I notice, we have the closing down of the winding down of K&Co. And you just mentioned that K&Co would have done extensive research,
right,
whether it be for the cane products, but that is valuable research. I believe that, I don't know if that is what has been done, that the ministry could also benefit from. What happens now after they wind down? What will happen with the land? What will happen with that space? What are some of the equipment? What did they learn? What are the lessons learned from that experience? So it's not only that the partnership regarding investments and regarding initiatives, but also with information. How can we feed from you? How can you feed into us? And then what is it that we can do together to build? And I believe that once the confidence is restored, once we know that a businessman knows that if I need this amount, I can get it, or I know how to get it, I know where to access it. Because there's also the issue where a farmer will say, you have, right now the glut on the market with watermelon.
Right.
I have so much of watermelon. But then you hear somebody in Ghana and say, I need watermelon. But there isn't that connection of information of who wants and who has. All right?
Bring the buyers and sellers together.
Bring them together. And then I believe MNIB comes into the talk, the GCNA and all these other institutions and associations politicians will come into the conversation. But I believe that there is a place for the private sector to get involved. Once we come together, we share information. Once we understand that there will be the infrastructure in place, because we can see private sector getting involved, we have a social responsibility, but at the end of the day, if it isn't profitable, if it doesn't make financial sense, business sense, you wouldn't get an investor rushing to get into that particular industry.
Certainly understand that. Viewers and listeners, thank you for being with us. It is time for our first break, so we'll be right back and continue this very interesting conversation.
Get ready! A new season of the Grand Leg Debates is coming. Informative, impromptu, bright young minds sparking powerful ideas. Tune in.
And so it begins. A journey like none other. Every moment has the potential to be unforgettable. Bring home a piece of the tropical green forest with every emerald. Capture the sparkling light of flawless water in a diamond. Make the sunrise and sunsets last forever. With precious colored gemstones, the essence of happiness is in our most precious memories. So when it all comes to an end, bring home something that will last forever. Colombian Emeralds International. Bring home more than a memory.
Spend $50 or more at any Hubbard's department or participating outlets for a chance to win free fuel, free drinks, free prizes, free property and vehicular insurance, free Hub TV and internet, free electricity, free coke, free water, free cooking gas, free paint supplies, free Dutch Lady milk, free passes to Sunshine promotion events for 2024, free groceries, all for one whole year, and every winner receives a free lunch package. But that's not all. Drive away in style in a brand new Isuzu D-Max. It sips, it doesn't guzzle. So fill out your entries and place them into the marked entry boxes. This promotion is brought to you in part by Dutch Lady, Danny, Promo, Supreme Bleach, Creative Chef, Grenlac, Floor, Salt Petroleum, Grenadian General Insurance Company Limited, Coca-Cola, Sunshine Promotion, Caribberies, Coop Bag, Sesame Spain, and Food Fear. Promotion runs from April 2nd to December 24. Terms and conditions apply.
Are you looking for a reliable, affordable, and customer-friendly pharmacy? Look no further than Hills and Valley Pharmacy, the nation's leading healthcare products and services provider. We are committed to serving you at convenient locations. Find an extensive and affordable selection of prescription and over-the-counter drugs and medical supplies at Church Street, Hillsborough, Carriacou, Jubilee Street, Grenville, St. Andrew, near the bus terminal, and Halifax and Grenville Street, St. George. Our committed team is always available to offer valuable assistance for managing your health and wellness. Discover the additional benefits of our wholesale distribution on Halifax Street and our Medcare Center on Grenville Street, where we provide in-house physiotherapy, massage therapy, doctor consultations, and eye care services. Our commitment is to satisfy all your healthcare needs, including competitive prices, loyalty rewards, and special discounts for seniors. Contact us at 435-6904 and WhatsApp 535-4734. Choose Hills and Valley Pharmacy. Remember, your health is our business.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. We're talking food security on this evening's program of Beyond the Headlines. Senator, I know you had to make a point before we left off.
Two perspectives on the previous comments. One has to do with the buyers and growers. There is a tool that is referred to as a buyer-grower conference, where the buyers and sellers come together and discuss openly what the demands are, varieties, quantities, sort of price ranges, etc. And then the growers would say, well, look, okay, I could produce this. So it's almost like a bid in a discussion. And you may leave there that I as a grower might be able to say I was able to lock down 3 markets for the next 6 months or for the next 9 months. And you live there, and then the question from you have to know, it's just like any evaluation, show me that you could produce these items. And that's where the Ministry of Agriculture and the technical people come in to sort of support the private sector and say, yes, Tom could produce that. Tom could produce only half. So this is what we could give Tom. Say, okay, and this is how we have to do those things. Rather than sitting by, when they come for this license and this importation, to just sit in a room and say, okay, we're under pressure, politics, we can't leave, the tourists have to get feed and so on. We have to stand up and do things properly. And you could put your planning in place. So if you know the tourism season into Christmas is a big area, then since early in the year, you start putting your plan in place, because the major issues we have to look at have to do with seeds availability for inputs, particularly planting material. You have to put it together. So you cannot say you're ready to plant cucumbers to have available in November, when the importers of these seeds import once a year, and what they import finishes in March, and they decide they're not importing for the rest of the year. I've seen these sort of things happen. So then you end up with a scarcity come December, these farmers have to try and import it from Trinidad or somewhere, because we're not looking at this planting material. So that is one perspective. The other perspective I want to put on the table is this thing about retirement and so on. It's laughable. It's laughable, Colin, because if you look through the whole private sector, not the public sector, I'm certain, from the police commissioner, I think recently, and not just this current one that is there, I said, retired people, we call back. And you go wrong. So you ask yourself, why is it we're afraid to bring in these retired people in agriculture? Do we really want them to go? We didn't want them around, so they gone and we can't, and it wasn't no good? Why can't we bring them back? Because you have a crisis, you have a situation, you really care about the people, you want to make sure they get food. Yes, we could make excuses and say people are studying, but you had people, as Lauren said, who retired. Say, guys, come back for 2 years, let us see how we can make sure we feed this country. But instead, we have other retired persons, as it may be, in many other parts of the public sector. So who does this thing?
So why is it a lack of prioritization of agriculture? Why we have this type of attrition?
Yeah, and I think the Ministry of Agriculture is not standing up for itself sufficiently. I may be standing up more for the Ministry of Agriculture than they themselves. They're not standing up. Lauren, I'd like to hear her she speak. I hope that they don't give trouble tomorrow after they speak so candidly. But this is the truth. You need to speak up. I need to stand up for your part of the band. Otherwise, nobody would bother you.
Lauren, we hear quite a bit of sustainable farming practices. What is that?
Sustainable farming practices would refer to those practices when you're I shouldn't say practices for practices, right. But the things that you would do, that whole basket of things that you would do in order to produce, and to produce in a way that does the least harm to your environment, to your water, to your soils, and of course ensuring that you have the amount of food or the quality that you need every time you produce. So we're speaking about it's actually a change from where we came from. The Green Revolution, that brought about all types of farming practices. The only thing that was important was producing, and producing quickly, and producing in mass. So you would have used all different sorts of chemicals. You had a system and a timetable of how much of these chemicals that you would use all of the time. There was no thought as to things like we think about now, like no tilling or little tilling or the least amount of interference of the soil as possible. There wasn't any thought about adding back compost or organic matter to the soil. It was a matter of clear everywhere. Get it clean so that it can be mechanized, and you will spray on a schedule, you will fertilize on this heavy schedule. And so now we're trying to really look at what effects those practices would have had on our soils, on whether or not, or how healthy our food is to eat. We just recently, I was reading a study and in the Caribbean actually, on people who would have been in the banana industry and would have been the sprayers. Right. And most of them, a very high percentage, probably you think it was about 85% of them, have some form of cancer. Many of them would have died from that, and then a lot of them would still be. And you have to think about, is there a correlation? It's a small group of people when you think about the amount of, if you think about all of the Caribbean, you think about that group of people and the fact that 85% of them would have been affected. So now we have to think about, how do we produce this food that we want to eat, and we want our children to eat, and our grandchildren to eat, and our elder parents to eat, and our grandparents to eat? How do we produce this food in a manner that is safe, as safe as we can, using, because you have to use, most of the times, you would probably need to use, and when you think about producing on a large scale, you'd have to employ some different types of chemicals. So, but you have to think about how often you use this. How do you treat with the clothes that you would use to spray?
Are we doing this type of training now to ensure that these practices are?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes, the ministry does that.
Senator, in realistic terms, what are some of the negative fallouts of maintaining this high food import bill? We're talking $250 million, in terms of imports. What are some of the fallout?
Well, immediately, from a economy standpoint, you are losing out of foreign exchange. And the issue about that, and the banks will tell you that, and the ECCB and so on will tell you that, and even Ministry of Finance. And we should be very happy in Grenada. I remember eons of years ago, to get even $100, you have to fill up a form in the Ministry of Finance and wait how long to get it. Now we could spend this money instantly, and we should be very happy.
Well, you could do that in Grenada, you can't do that in Trinidad.
Exactly, and that is the point I'm trying to get at. So, but we have done that because we have been able to grow and manage in a certain way. And one of the negative consequences is if we continue on that path for too long, when you start managing that exchange money, how much US dollars we have, there is a word, I can't remember, you in this business, there's a word for that, depending on how much US dollars or foreign currency you have against your EC dollars, there's a ratio, and that also affects a lot of your movements in doing business. That is a big issue.
The balance of trade is what you're referring to?
No, it's something to do with the foreign currency. Yeah, it has to do something with that. So if you want to buy goods, how much money you have that you want to utilize, and how much you have remaining, is the strength of your dollar. So that's very critical. I think the issue of reputation is a big issue. As a nation, our proudness, living on foreign items, depending on it, if there is some crisis, whether it's internally or externally, that shock on us. How do we adjust ourselves? These are serious issues. On the other side, people speak about health and nutrition. Some of these items were produced over a year ago and is stored in all different chemicals and bad conditions, so it's not healthy. Because if it's local, it's fresh and it's better. So these are some of the immediate things I could see. There might be many others, but these are some, I would say, of the glaring ones.
Dennis, how can we close the gap? What do you suggest?
So, going back to the balance of payment issue and balance of trade. Yes, it's a very important and a critical area that we have to look at. We know that, to be honest with you, there's only about 5 or 6 countries in the world that has a positive balance of trade. Because even America has minus $2.something trillion negative deficit, right? Trade deficit. But they have a GDP that can sustain that, right? They have that internal economy that can sustain that, right? We need to lower that bill, because really and truly that, going back to the issue of the money that is going out, that continuously going out of our country, the fact that we have a small economy, we cannot be self-sustained, we cannot produce everything that we need, but where we can find the areas that we can reduce and create what we can, produce what we need and produce what we can consume internally, and maybe even get to the point where we can export that. I think that is the best route for a sustainable development within our economy. But added to that, coming to closing that gap, I think it starts with how do we change the demand? How do we change the demand of the society? What we're asking for, what we're calling for? How can we put policies in place, practices in place, whereby somebody who's a company, a private sector company who's thinking about importing will say, no, let me choose to purchase locally before I think about importing. I'll give you an example. 2-3 weeks ago, right? I don't know if you all noticed, everybody noticed we had a shortage of rice, right? What was the fallout of that? Did everybody just stop eat? Was that macaroni? Was that macaroni got a little bit an uptick in macaroni, or local provisions, or local? Well, at that time we also had a shortage of provisions and so on. So that was a kind of
was the cause of shortage of rice, the shortage of provision?
No. I don't believe so. I think there's some linkages, but I think that was just probably one was due to burial and the next one was due to some in terms of trade supply deficit. But what was the missed opportunity there? To see what was the supplementary diet of persons when there was no rice. I saw the basmati rice there just looking at you on the shelves, and nobody was really looking at it. But I know that there was some substitute, and what was that, and how are we producing it here? Right. So there are ways for us to influence culture, influence habits. Sometimes it might just be remove that particular product. If there's a shortage, what do we do? And because the elasticity of demand that we learn in economics, for certain products, it doesn't matter how much we think we like it. The moment it's not there, we find something else. We find a substitute. So we need to understand that as an economy. It goes back to the planned economy. Understand how that works, and see how can we. I keep going back to the policy, but it's more than policy. How can we create a culture?
Where do we put our monies? Is it in more agricultural lands? Are we talking more equipment? Are we looking for investments in secondary products? How and when do we invest in the training of personnel? In research, where do we start? Is it all of the above? And how do we prioritize?
I actually think it's maybe all of the above. But first, as I said before, we need to plan. We need to have a plan. As Senator Sinclair said, we need to get not just technical agriculturalists, because I'm an agronomist. I think a certain way because I studied how to grow food. Right? I know that, so I think that. But we have to get other people around the table, because we have to start thinking in value chains and thinking, along the entire line of this chain, who is needed. And if we think about our food, our entire food system as a value chain, then you need to get all the people. You get Senator Sinclair, you get the economists, you get the private sector, you get public, and you bring them together, as he said, and then we can have a plan that would encompass all of the things, because I wouldn't think about everything, and he wouldn't think about everything, and he wouldn't think. But when you come together, we can see where you have missing links, and then you can make those links, put those links together. So how our agriculture stands at this point, our sector stands at this point, it is in a place of rebuilding. Not just because of what happened with Hurricane Beryl, which was a catastrophe, and it has had catastrophic effects on our agricultural sector. But it can also, in my mind, be looked at as an opportunity. It has happened. We were not asking for it to happen. We're not happy that it happened, but it has happened. So now we are at a point where we could reset and we can decide this is what we're going to do. And for the next 3 years, we're going to build on what we're going to do. We have to start, basically the Ministry of Agriculture has had to start from zero. We didn't have a farm machinery pool. We're soon going to be getting one back. We didn't have, as Senator Sinclair, he was talking about the personnel, but we didn't have personnel. We still don't have as many as we need, but hopefully we're working on getting some of that also. And so the inputs and all of that, the research is one of the areas that for some reason we have not put enough importance on our research area. We have allowed our input suppliers and so to bring in what they want, or to bring in what a farmer might say produces the most or whatever. But the ministry is not able to say, this is the best seed because we've tested it and we've done so and so, and it's best for drought resistance, or it's, we have not done that. And so we have to, like I said, we have to put a plan in place, the ministry and wider. We have to put a plan in place. But first, like I said, the ministry has to decide where it is we're going, what it is we're going to do. For the next 5 years, we have to prioritize. We're going to do so and so. These crops are what we're going to be really focusing on, and get these crops up and running. There are some things I think that would be easy to do. We import tons of lettuce, all different types of lettuce, tons of lettuce. Containers are coming in with lettuce, and this is not something that we cannot produce. Right. We can produce this, but we have to decide, okay, we're going to focus on getting some farmers who have land or some areas wherever, and we're going to be putting in greenhouses or shade houses and have protected culture, and decide what it is we're going to do and do that.
Right. Okay, let's take our last break, and then when we come back, certainly the conversation will continue, but you will have an opportunity to join us, 440-1252. That will be the number. We'll be right back.
It's the event you won't want to miss. GIDC Business Deals Day is happening on Saturday, October 12th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Frequenty Industrial Park playing field. Explore the latest products and service offerings from businesses within the industrial parks. Enjoy discounts on GIDC business support services and get fantastic deals on household items, building materials, accessories, condiments, and more, with exciting prizes up for grabs throughout the day. But that's not all. Dive into a mini health fair and career expo for valuable health education and employment opportunities, all while enjoying the songs of Trio the Band and DJ Graphic Sounds. It will be a fun-filled day filled with eats, drinks, games, deals, and more. Mark your calendars and join the GIDC at Frequenty Industrial Park playing field on Saturday, October 12th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. See you there.
To give thanks the long Thanksgiving weekend. Legends Promotions presents the 18th annual Hubbard's Legends in Concert, Saturday, October 26th, Grenada Trade Center at 7:30 p.m. Featuring the 1980 Calypso Monarch Survivor. Together with Stubbles. 10 times Calypso Monarch Scholar. Alongside Luther, Tobago Crusoe, and 7 times Soca and 10 times Road March King. Super Blue. Super Blue. Tickets cost $60 and are available at all Gittins Healthcare Pharmacies, Wall Street, Grenville, and Guelph, Springs Shopping Center, St. David's Pharmacy, Clef Vision Eye Care Center, on the Carinage, and Gittins Pharmacy, St. George's. It's the 18th annual Hubbard's Legends in Concert, Saturday, October 26th, Thanksgiving weekend, Grenada Trade Center, 7:30 p.m. You can't afford to miss this one.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. We're talking food security, and if we're talking food security, is the production of course, the consumption of, and harmonization. And Senator, I want to get to you. How can we move past the lip service and get greater alignment between our agricultural and tourism sectors here in Grenada?
Well, it's a good question, Colin. I think that the tourism sector, the food service sector, provides a very important market opportunity for agriculture, whether it's value added or a fresh product. And so again, it comes back to that connection and dialogue. I think that there's a Hotel and Tourism Association, and that's excellent. There's a grouping already existing. My good friend, may his soul rest in peace, Brother Dowe, we had serious discussions about how do we create that connection with the tourism sector already. I know the new chairman of the Tourism Authority, Brother Dowe, I know he's excited about the agriculture connection. So I think that dialogue, but at the same time, and I laugh as I say it, is that when you look at the Act, the Tourism Authority Act, you have all different sectors. And as a matter that I had raised in the previous administration, there is no allowance for representation from agriculture and fishing to sit at the board of the Tourism Authority. We got in a committee, we go consult with them. And it comes back to the same issue about leadership confidence and put your money where your mouth want to be. Okay. So if you're not at the table, what happens?
First caller online. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Good evening to you, sir, and to the panelists. Now, due to the state of our planet and the direction we're going down,
you could lower the volume on your radio and speak into the telephone. Your listeners to us through the telephone.
With me right now. I just the phone I have in my room. I don't have any radio or TV.
So go ahead.
Hey? Are you hearing me?
Okay, we seem to be having some challenges hearing you, so would you kindly call back? We certainly appreciate your input. If you'd call us back. And 440-1252, that's the number to join the conversation. I'm just going to go fast and furious, because how do we bring the cost down to getting the food to consumers?
Well, it's a good question, and is a matter that I have some concerns about. I mean, part of it has to do with technology that we use, the techniques to improve our productivity. For example, you may want to look at high density planting, using different shade houses and all of those different type of things. But there are some other matters again that the private sector need to look at. I believe is a matter that I've advocated previously and continue to speak about. There are some key inputs that we need in agriculture, notwithstanding that what government is doing with some of the subsidized fertilizer, but there are many other inputs that we need in agriculture that need to be price controlled such that we can adjust the margins and not leave it to the whims and fancy of the private sector. So they're killing us on both sides. They put in the products on the one side, and some of them involved in the input business, and they're killing us on the other side with the cost of the input, because you go to get tablets, say, for your diabetes, for cancer, for hypertension, etc. They are generally price controlled because government thinks it's a good public good, because it's our food is our medicine.
Right.
Our food.
We have another caller online.
So if
let's
we
get
could
a caller.
manage that.
Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Good evening, gentlemen. To the
It seems as that call dropped.
Yeah. But we need to look at that. I think that there are certain items that we need to have a price control on a suite of items. Not all, a suite of common items. I think the Ministry of Agriculture knows those items. It may not be even 20 items.
One of the things I would mention is the difficulty, because sometimes there's a glut on the market, and then there's a scarcity. Lauren also made the point that farmers are farmers, they're not marketers necessarily. Have you heard anything about the new look MNIB? When is that going to be coming on stream? What is going to be the mandate? That type of thing.
We haven't heard nothing. All we heard, their report was supposed to be available since in June. Cabinet's supposed to look at it. So we are waiting. But what I would say, notwithstanding that you need an instrument as MNIB to guarantee your food security, and not even speaking on export and all of those things, but food security instrument, because they have the buying, the storage, the logistics, which the Ministry of Agriculture doesn't really have. Because remember, MNIB emerged as from a department in the Ministry of Agriculture way back under Gary days to what it is today. It didn't just happen like that for the history of persons. So what I'm saying is that is one angle. But the other part we need to look at, Colin and listeners and viewers, is the issue of contract farming. We need to look at contract farming. This is proven and used throughout the world. That would help us to manage the issue of gluts and shortages, because you can guarantee farmers market, you can guarantee pricing, you can negotiate those things, and then having a contract also give them leverage, because then they can use these contracts, billheads, purchase orders, if you want to say, as factors, right, and go to the bank. The same private sector can even factor it under the line of credit with the banks that they have for a certain amount of value. Because I'm not saying go to GDB, I'm just saying it because my friend Brother Comabach, you all are waste of time, total waste of time, because we cannot get what we want in the agriculture sector. A lot of lip service and talk, but I believe the private sector, if we sit down at the table, work out those contracts, this is the situation, the farmer is going to deliver, we can give you a line of credit for if it's 25%, you can get your inputs, get your labor, ministry support. I believe, Colin, seriously, that those things can work, because I've seen it work. When I was in MNIB, we had programs where we were able to use some of those things.
We have another caller online, so good evening, caller, and welcome.
Yeah, good evening to you and the panelists. I hope you're hearing me clearly now.
We are.
Right. I was saying, due to the state of our planet right now, with respect to natural disasters that has never been seen before, probably primarily due to climate change, and also due to costly wars at the moment all over the place, Africa, Asia, all about. Food security should be first on the agenda, second on the agenda, third on the agenda. And the government of Grenada have to think in terms of subsidizing agriculture more and more and more, and helping farmers more and more financially and with labor and stuff. Water, rainwater harvesting has to be on the agenda, because you could jump high, you could jump low. There are times when they're going to have severe drought. And then you have to select crops that will thrive under dry conditions like cassava and so. That has to be in the picture, because things not likely to get better in the near future. And then when you look at our situation, if you take a census and you see the average age of the farmers in Grenada, it's pretty high. Just by going to the nutmeg stations to sell nutmeg, or to the cocoa stations to sell nutmeg, you will see the average age of the farmers is around bordering 70 and above, 60 to 70 something.
All right, thank you very much, caller, and we get it. So a couple of things on here. One is just the need for food security because of where we are now. We have wars that are happening. There's no if but I suppose, which would impact on the inputs, oil prices, and others. We have the strike that has been postponed or deferred, the Miami port and certainly the eastern border. But right now we have a strike on the port in Trinidad, and likewise that can impact us. So the need is there. How can we better safeguard ourselves against these external pressures?
All right, so if I can jump in here and just make just 2 points. One point I was referring to, and we go back to the port, but referring to the whole issue of this public sector subsidizing agriculture. I have an issue with the way that this happens, whereby we throw money, we throw capital, we throw equipment at farmers, and we say, go and do things, right? Put it on TV, we're doing this in the farming industry. 5 years from now, the farmer needs now to replenish. He needs to sustain, he needs to maintain this equipment, he needs to replant, he needs to. But the farmer doesn't have, as you say, he's a farmer, he's not a marketer, he's not a businessman. And a lot of the time what happens is that initial help brings them 2 steps forward. But then there's nothing in place, there's no infrastructure in place to keep that momentum going. Right. And being a part of the financial sector, a lot of times we encounter farmers, fisher folk, small business persons who got assistance to start, but then they were left to fend for themselves.
Okay, we have another caller online, so let's just take that caller. Good evening, caller, and welcome.
Yes, good night. I'm listening to the program, and I think 2 of the presenters tonight made mention of deficit in terms of manpower. One in terms of, I think, in terms of the extension officers, etc.
Yes.
From my recollection, I think you have some 5,000 or more farmers registered. And I absolutely don't see how a dozen or so extension officers who are not equipped with modern technology can actually service these 5,000 farmers, whether they have 1 acre, 5 acres, or 20 acres. In order, in my opinion, for agriculture to go forward, and someone just made mention about farmers, MTAs, so forth, so on. I think we absolutely have to get some manpower outside of this country. We depend a lot on manual labor for most farmers. The conditions that we have is not mechanized, and I think we ought to look at getting some labor from some other countries, maybe Haiti, maybe Cuba, wherever, and bring them in. Finally, I would say that with respect to technology, the extension officers can use mobile phones equipped with WhatsApp and all the other implements so that they can stay wherever and they can talk to a farmer and get pictures and send videos, and they don't have to go to all the farms. And especially the women folk don't like to visit the farms up in the mountains. I can tell you that for a fact.
Okay. All right. Responses, both in terms of the bolstering of the human resources.
Yeah, well, I am very open and I have no issues, and I've been on public record for the importation of labor for our agriculture sector. We have done it for many other sectors again, but when it comes to agriculture, we seem to be shy. And so I'm trying to figure out, what are we scared of? We do it in medicine, we do it in accounting, we do it in engineering, we do it in tourism. Don't talk about that. Tourism all over the place. Chief chef, this, that. What is our problem? And then a point I want to raise here, as my brother raised, about the farmers are left alone. It happens because we don't have a proper system to support the farmer, whether we give him money or loan. So it's not give, you know. He needs technical help. He needs support. And so if we have this platform where you're dealing with the contract farming and all those things, you put the supported mechanisms. I mean, we could have a whole program to talk about how do we look at financing and supporting mechanisms. I've looked at some models of that. You need to have, so for example, if you give a guy $5,000, instead of that $5,000, to me, you should cater for if it's $500, where you would be able to pay for technical support. The Ministry of Agriculture may come, but we know most of the time they ain't gonna make it, right? So the businessman, he pays for that technical service to be able to show that the product gonna be delivered, you're gonna be able to get your money, and the person that have to get the product will get the product. I think
we have another one weighing in. So good evening, caller. Welcome.
Good night, sir, and good night to Mr. Sinclair and Miss Lorraine, I think is her name, and the gentleman, I don't know the gentleman's name. And I must admit that I am impressed with you all tonight. Three of you all have given human service there tonight. I am totally in favor with 95% with what you all saying. But our problem is keep going wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong. A lot of things that you're saying there have been said since Adam was a little boy. And we're seeing them again, and we're not seeing any improvement in them. And I think what we need to do to see now is a documentation. For instance, the lady said that they short staff. Well, if you short staff of extension officer, you have all extension officers there who could assist and who is willing, people who are willing to assist. That is not being utilized. You have, first of all, people have to want to know about their marketing. It doesn't make sense telling people to plant if you're not certain about your market. We must be guaranteed of market price. I just heard the lady say that that there are loads of lettuce coming in. Why that have to be? If you have proper market structure, that shouldn't happen at all. It shouldn't be happening. So while you may not be able to, but what about the technocrats and the planners? We should know what outside people want to buy. Do we have market? Can we find market? Can we find transport to take goods from Grenada to Trinidad or other places? Those are the things that we have to get in, and a lot could be done. A lot could be done if we can. Since after the hurricane, the government have a meeting with farmers as to sensitize farmers as to where they're going. We're talking about marketing board again. Where is it? You know, there's so much to be done, so much planning, and
Thank you very much for that caller and the contributions. Lauren, a couple of things, of course, was cited, but it was interesting to me. You mentioned it, but looking at the OECS, and it's not dissimilar from the Caribbean. When you look at the leading imports, we see meats, we see cereals, we see fruits and vegetables. We see that the Caribbean imports more fish products than we export. How? I mean, how are we here, and how can we get out of this serious deficit?
Well, again, it depends on what is being demanded. There's some fish. The fish that is imported, is mainly like freshwater fish, which we don't. Not that we can't, but which we don't.
Is it one of pricing in that the freshwater fish is cheaper, and hence there is that market for it?
I think most of the freshwater fish is probably used in the hotel in that sector.
Don't get Senator riled up again, you know.
No, but it is used in that. Most of it is used in that sector. We are not really used to eating tilapia and salmon, and general regular Grenadians don't really.
Okay. We have our final caller, so let's take that caller and be right back. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm sitting here. I cannot say the conversation is interesting because we've been there already. My question is, why is it you people continue to speak of the same thing over and over and not make a firm decision on how we can change what is happening? Is it that we've been inconsistent in what we do? Is that we do not do sufficient planning? I would like to suggest that the people of this country come together and reconstitute this. We fail in the production of our own food because we do not have a constitution protection for what we known as the economic structure of the country. So the demagogues that come into office change everything every time a new administration comes in, and we waste a whole load of money and we get nothing done.
Thank you very much, Colin.
Do you have any ideas on whether or not you would agree with me for a reformation of the constitution of this country? Thank you very much.
All righty. Go ahead.
I mean, some time ago, about 10 years, 8 years ago, there was a whole movement of what you call zero hunger. Dr. Malachi Dottin was at the ministry then, was a lead advocate. On that, I was also a member of that committee. And it was a whole worldwide push of zero hunger.
But we're going CARICOM now, OECS now, 25 by 2025. And we're sitting here in October. Yeah. And it was supposed to be 25% less food imports on our 2019 bill by 2025. We are significantly greater than our 2019 bill, and we have 3 months to go.
We had Jack Deere initiative 7, 10 years ago, and nothing has happened. So something is wrong. But I'm going back to that point, and I will show where the wrong is happening. So a lot of initiatives, zero hunger, getting the public involved, do all of those things, work with the school feeding program, and then there was supposed to be a parliamentary caucus, because this is at the highest level now. So at the parliament, the Senate, the House, if you have 5 or 6 members, who are going to be champion this whole zero hunger, food security, and at that stage, it never got there. So it tells you that someone afraid to put their foot, like Jesus Christ, to walk on the water.
So again, you're pointing to leadership or the lack thereof.
Well, Jesus Christ put his foot on the water and he walked.
We have our final caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome. I seem as though we lost that caller. I'm going to mention Guyana and the land mass. I know that there have been offers from the Guyanese government, and I'm talking food security now regionally. Why haven't we taken this up? Just in speaking as well,
we as Grenada,
have not taken that up. Why, for example, there isn't greater collaboration among our governments to achieve economies of scale as we import? Because there's one thing that we produce, but then we have to do the packaging. And packaging can itself be expensive. Look at the overall cost of bringing things to market. Why aren't we collaborating as much as we can and should?
Well, what I would say, and I would put a dot on that, because I know about a month ago, Chichima and the Tourism Authority and Brother Dolan, there were initiatives to go into Guyana, meet the private sector, and look at accessing these lands. Even though that opportunity was there maybe about 15 years ago. And they were looking at that collaboration. I trust that something come out of that. And as a country, for example, we speak about, I was in an agriculture consultation a few weeks ago, and the issue about doing corn, for example, maybe getting some lands in Guyana and do corn to help for our livestock, rather than using the wheat coming in from the north. So it would be a sort of input, but it's still a local input within us. So again, Colin, it leads back to the same story. I mean, if I just take you one more point, the issue of cassava is very interesting, because I love cassava, and I fell in love in cassava even more when I went to Rwanda some many years ago. I realized they had a cassava factory, just like how we have the Caribbean Agro flour factory, and they were doing tons and tons of cassava flour in different packages and all of those things. And then you look at Trinidad. through the Caribbean Business Association, CABA. They were looking at how do you substitute, say, about 45% of the wheat when you're making bread. So you use, instead of using 2 pounds of flour, you may use, say, 1 pound of wheat and 1 pound of ground cassava as a substitute. So there have been different initiatives. So for example, the Village Bakery in Grenada, they do a cassava bread, and that is a sort of output from that initiative. How did I discover that? I discovered that because we were exporting plantains to Trinidad in tons. Then we say, well, what are you doing with the plantains? They say, we are actually taking the plantains, we are grinding it, and we are using 40% of the plantain and mix it with flour. And we say, well, hold on, so how do we try this in Grenada? So then we were able to partner with Cardi and others, and we were able to introduce. I think only Village Bakery continues. Again, where is the private sector?
Private sector, so Denison, you'll have to respond to that. How can we better incentivize the private sector to invest in the agricultural sector?
Yeah, so it goes back, first of all, to the confidence, the infrastructure, I should say, not just the confidence, the infrastructure. One of the issues that private sector have with agro-processing in Grenada is the issue with the high energy bill. Right, we have a very high energy bill, and so sometimes it makes more sense to open up a factory in Trinidad than open it in Grenada. I'm just talking from an investor point of view. How do we approach this issue? We've talked about renewables, we've talked about public partnership with the private sector and so on, to reduce this energy bill, to put infrastructure in place so that we can get the ball rolling. So I'm saying if we have the different infrastructure in place that will facilitate the process, I believe that there are private sector, there are investors who are willing to take that step and come into that market. We know that there's a high demand. We know that it could be profitable, but getting into the space requires that not only on the government side, but also on our side of the chambers, but that there has to be the atmosphere in place that we can actually have a profitable venture as relates to getting into that space.
All right. Lauren, I know we spoke agriculture and a lot of the leaning, and I know in terms of the listeners, we are talking planting plants, but we haven't addressed things like poultry and ruminants. How can we grow that sector? Because the largest import bill is still meats. Right. How can we grow that sector in Grenada to at least reduce, because we're not going to eliminate it, but how can we grow the sector at home to reduce it?
Well, actually, we've just been working on the poultry policy, which will give some guidelines as to how we do what it is we want to do. In addition to which, we have now, I think it's either 2 or 3 larger farms that will soon be, I think in October, middle of October this year, we'll be having, one of them has a hatchery, or both of them have hatcheries. But in October, I know for sure one of them will be, their first batch of chicks will be produced. Because at least in the poultry industry, one of the things that limits the farmers on their production is the chicks, getting the day-old chicks. They have to be flown in from Barbados. They have to be ordered. You have to wait a long time. So that is that's one of the things. In addition to which, we have been having conversations with the feed company here. See how it is we could reduce the cost of the feed. If you look at it, I mean, it's open, so it's information out there. Feed that is produced in Grenada is cheaper to purchase in St. Lucia than it is to purchase in Grenada. Why? What are we doing? So we have to be able to bring our inputs down, because what happens and what has been happening in terms of poultry, in terms of or meat production, the small ruminants is a whole different story, because culturally we grow goats and sheep forever. We just grow them and grow them and grow them until a lot of times you have an emergency. Right. And then you need something and you kill. You have to start thinking
wait
about
for Christmas.
You have to start thinking about the useful life of these animals. After a while, it becomes that you're only feeding, and it's not going to get heavier. The quality of the meat actually goes down after a certain time, and so we have to start educating our farmers. So I think that is one of the main things: education, education, education. We were speaking about the cost of produce. Just a lot of the times, if you ask a farmer, why is this $10? It's $10 because everybody's selling it for $10.
Right.
Not that I know that I put in $5 of this, I put in $3 of labor, and the next 2 is my profit. You know, it's hardly ever that. There we have to get our farmers to think like business people. Not business in terms of going and market, but how to put in the least amount, know exactly what it is you're using, and get the most out of your production. And I think that is some of the areas that we can really focus on to ensure that our farmers are producing at a maximum.
It's time for us to wrap up. I know when we said it was a 90-minute program, you guys thought it was a long program, but it's time for us to wrap up. Dennison, just some closing thoughts as we think of food security and how the private sector can partner to get Grenada there.
All right, so first of all, one of the things that I thought of when concerning food security, and I think going back to the strike, going back to burial, going back to COVID, is what do we have in place in terms of a business continuity plan? Why do we always have to scramble when things happen? When a hurricane passes, then we're scrambling, we're trying to figure out what to do. I believe that planning is very important, not just a plan of how to proceed, but how do we continue this process? How can we set up infrastructure? How can we set up all the things that we need along the value chain to allow to create that atmosphere for agriculture to blossom, for the farmers to be profitable? How do we make sustainable agriculture the in thing, right? And then it goes back now to how do we now inspire and motivate a society to change the demand where we look local and we ask for local, but at the same time, how do we create a productivity where this local produce doesn't cost twice as much as the imported produce? So I believe that there's a lot of work to be done, but it will require some growing pains. It will require some people being uncomfortable for a while until they get accustomed to it, and I think that is where a lot of leadership comes in, and a lot of persons, they are not willing to be the unfavored or the unpopular person in order for these things to happen. But I believe that as a private sector, we have a part to play. At the end of the day, we are the one doing most of the importing. We are the one that are placating to the demands of the society. So we have to now work together with public sector, work together with our customers to ensure that we build the Grenada that we want to see. And I think it's possible, but a lot of the talking has to become action, and we have to put these things in place.
Senator, I'll go with you because the lady will have the last word, as they always do.
Yes, well, I would first say thank you for having me, and it's a good topic that we can share with the public tonight. But it's not just chit-chat. We are very passionate persons about this issue, and we trust that all those who are listening from the policy level and all the others, private sector, etc., that we can see some kind of phone call, some sort of dialogue, some platform be set up where we can have some discussions and move this forward. I mean, that is what we need. There's a lot of talk, as we've been saying, but we need some action. We need persons, even at the home level, to also do the little that you can do for yourself and not just depend on government, depend on the private sector. As my brother say, in 1 week time, if something happened, do you have the type of food system set up for you to be able to survive in some way? Where's the root crops that you can plant? So no matter what happens, you have some tania, some sweet potato, or some dashin, you know. So we have those sort of things, but at the community level. And so while we're speaking here, the issue of NADMA, and what is the role of NADMA in all of this mix? Because NADMA sometimes tend to offside and feel it's only drains and stuff, but the food part is very critical. And as I keep saying, MNIB is responsible for the food supply sector under the NADMA arrangement. So NADMA we have to call you out, and your job is to make sure that the government supports you in a sort of way to ensure that food security is your business, because in an emergency, in a disaster, NADMADA is in charge, not us. NADMADA the police. We can't go nowhere. They're supposed to bring our care package for us.
Thank you. Lauren, your closing comments, and if you have a wish list, you certainly can share a couple of items on the wish list.
Sure. Thanks, Colin, for having us on. It was a very interesting conversation. Thank you to my colleagues also. Well, mostly what I'd like to say is that the Ministry of Agriculture is committed to ensuring that our farmers are assisted as much as possible. I know people would have said, and it is something that we also recognize, that there has been a lot of talk, and it's time for us to implement, and we will implement. Like I said before, we would really love to sit down around a table with a larger group of people where we can look into this issue of food security. It is not a simple thing, as people might just say, just produce. But it's not just that. It has a lot of intricate parts, but the issue of us producing our own food, the issue of us feeding ourselves, the issue of us feeding our tourists. I don't think tourists come to, I won't go to somewhere where I'm not of that culture and try to eat things that I would get in Grenada. I think tourists go somewhere to get a new experience, to experience the food. And so we need to really bring those industries, bring those sectors together. And so I really hope the next time we speak, we can speak about how far we've gotten, what it is we're doing, and where we're going, and how we can get to the next level, because we would have moved from zero, and now we're moving on. But we have had a lot of plans in place. We have been putting a lot of the structures that we would need to put in place. We've been doing that, getting a lot of the things done that have not been done for quite a while. So we're trying to get those things done in order to be as useful and for our farmers and our other stakeholders.
Very important topic, and open invitation to come back to say what you have accomplished. So that's the conversation we look forward to. Ms. Lawrence and Louis, Mr. Denison Slocum, and Senator Roderick Sinclair, thank you so very much for sharing on this very important topic. And to you, our viewers and listeners, for giving up part of your Monday evening as we discuss food security. A couple of things came through quite clearly, but one is that we all individually have a responsibility towards food security. One, yes, planting, but not just in planting. Our consumption habits influences what happens as well. So the talk of buy local, eat local, that should resonate with us as we move forward. Thank you so very much. I'm Colin Dowe. It's a pleasure being with you, and I look forward to being with you again in the next 6 days, 22.5 hours. Take good care.